What's up, comic book fans? Anchorpete here. And you know what? We always end up in a box. And so my friend over there, Brian, is in a box next to me. Hi, Brian. How you doing?
What's up, Pete?
Yes, all things end up in boxes. That's one of the many lessons I've taken from Jupiter's Legacy, which is just premiered on Netflix. Today, Brian and I, because we have kids, we have jobs, we can't binge all this shit in one day. So we're just reviewing episodes 1 and 2 of Jupiter's Legacy. Brian, first off, my first question for you is, if you were coming at this fresh, if you hadn't read the comic, right, and you didn't know much about Mark Millar, would you be interested in this story based on the first 2 episodes?
That is a great question, and I'm pretty sure my answer is no. I think there's some questionable acting, some questionable dialogue and writing in this. I don't like to badmouth people, but I felt Josh Duhamel and the actress that played Chloe, who's a name I don't really recall, kind of stood out as being a little on the weaker side, and everyone else is kind of serviceable. Nothing. The show didn't give me enough to want more necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I think reading the initial comic, I was reading it based on my previous enjoyment of the work of Mark Millar and Frank Wiley, the writer and artist of the book.
Right.
So if I just came into this cold based on the fact that maybe I like The Boys on Amazon, or I like the Marvel movies, or whatever, I would not be strongly inclined to continue it after the first 2 episodes.
Okay. Shocking to our viewers and to our listeners, I'm pretty much on the same page as you. The thing is, with Josh Duhamel, I definitely like you. I don't want to bad talk anybody, but I just don't think that he's kind of suited for this role as the Utopian. And they made the choice. They made the choice to take a young actor and age him up with makeup versus taking an old actor and like using computer, imagery to like de-age it. Right.
And I imagine that's some budgetary concerns.
Oh yeah. This isn't like The Irishman. They can't like de-age him like they did with De Niro. But I really do think that you need that kind of old soul kind of actor for this type of character. And he's like a young, hip, energetic guy. And he's trying real hard. I think he's doing a really good job. It's just like he's not really the right one for the part. I do think that when they have flashbacks when he's younger, I think that it works better then. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that they might have been had a better time if they would have cast an older actor for the present day and a younger actor for the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, good point. They could have had him as the younger actor, as the younger Utopian, and then just had somebody else, Yeah. Like a Liam Neeson or something would have been good.
Oh yeah, I mean you're not going to get Liam Neeson in a, I guess, smaller budget, streaming show, I guess.
Yeah. So, like, I really wanted to talk about the acting because I think that's the standout thing for me in general, is because there's a lot of, like, big concept dialogue in the first 2 episodes, and you really need the acting to sell it. And you really need the acting to sell the family dynamic. And I also did have issues with Chloe, especially how obnoxious she was. And I did feel like her dialogue was poorly written. So, like, that kind of highlighted any kind of poor acting right there.
And speaking of dialogue and writing, I mean, the first episode was directed and written by Steven DeKnight, who did the Daredevil series, and has worked under. Was he from under Joss Whedon?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's like, how do you go from how great Daredevil was to this? I guess.
Yeah. It really is based on the type of writer that you are. Right? Because Daredevil has a totally different dynamic. Even though it's a superhero show, it's so like urban crime and like street level stuff. And this is just like big picture Justice League stuff. Like it's like in the comics, like Bendis excels with Daredevil too. And Bendis excels with this street level crime stuff. But then the bigger stuff, it's not as good. It really depends on the type of superhero story you're trying to tell. So I actually like Ben Daniels a lot. I think I first saw him in House of Cards. He was kind of a side character in House of Cards. But then he's also in Rogue One. He's like in charge of like Blue Squad or whatever the hell the X-Wing squad is, or the Y-Wing squad. Yeah. And so he's good. He's been in a bunch of things. And I think that maybe he's the best one on the cast so far. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. And also, it figures he's British.
Yeah, right.
The Brits do great, the Americans not so much.
Yeah. But like, we know the comics, right? So we know what to expect. And so it really does feel like that this is sort of like a prequel thing leading up to the actual meat of the story of the comics. And to me, like if I was coming at this fresh and I was just watching this not knowing what happens in the comics, even in just the first issue of the comic, I'd be like, where's this going? What's the hook? You know?
Yeah. And another thing too, that I mean, there are 4 volumes of this comic, sort of. So there's Jupiter's Legacy and Jupiter's Circle. Jupiter's Legacy is the kind of the current present day story that I think this is mostly based on. And then there's Jupiter's Circle, which was the earlier adventures of the the Utopian and his crew. I've actually only read the first volume of Jupiter's Legacy. This was like one of those comics that was like plagued with delays. I think there was like at one point there was like a year between consecutive issues coming out, like 4 and 5. Yeah, it was crazy. And I remember reading it and liking it, and then just totally falling off the train, and buying it way later after it came out because I forgot about it.
There's a big shift in this story that people who are new to this aren't going to be expecting. And so from now on, for the rest of this episode, we're going to be talking spoilers. Keep in mind, we've only watched the first 2 episodes, but we know kind of what happens in the comics. This starts like around the time of the Great Depression, right? This story.
Yeah, I mean, it's all. I mean, I don't think they covered this pre-stuff as much in the comics.
No.
So initially in the comic, you see them post the stock market crash, but this shows you a little beforehand.
Yeah.
And it changes the origin a little bit. I mean, they're showing, they show Walt and Sheldon's dad, which I don't think they showed. And there's some pretty dramatic stuff that happens prior.
Yeah. And like they really dial up the parallels with Superman in this one, man. Whoa.
Yeah. In the show, they work on the farm, and they have the secret identity and all that. Yes. I mean, just the powers in general of the Utopian is very much on point with Superman.
And like reading the comics, I didn't really make the connection between his wife essentially being like Lois Lane. But like when you watch the second episode, it's like, yeah, okay, his wife's Lois Lane. Essentially the way it works with this show is that you have the people that are in the Union, and then they have their children, and the children kind of have powers that are very similar to their parents, right? So this guy Fitz, who was the Flare, he's got a daughter who's like the Flash, and she like punches that guy Black Star real fast at the very end of the episode, right?
Yes.
Then you have this guy Tectonic, and I don't really know whose son he would be, but he's an Asian guy too, which is kind of cool. Like, I like that they're using different ethnicities for these characters, and they're kind of expanding on it. Is that sort of that, like the younger generation is like all about the hype and being superheroes, and the older generation are all about like making the world a better place. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree there, and I think both the show and the comic, it's a combination for the younger generation of the celebrity, and plus also being born into it and not having the same kind of desire as the elder generation. So like they didn't ask for it, but they're kind of like forced into doing it in a sense.
Right.
And I actually really like that scene between Flair and his daughter, where he's saying like, you know what, you don't have to do this. Like I didn't ask you to do this, and I think that was really nice contrast compared to the relationship between the Utopian and his son, which I guess they're calling him Paragon.
Paragon.
I don't remember him having a name other than Brandon in the comic.
Yeah.
And actually, that brings up an excellent point. That character seems to be the most changed from the comic to me.
And
I feel like I could see a path where they're going to lead it in the same direction, but with some slightly different reasons behind it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you know what we should do? We should just go full in for the spoilers for the comic so we can address that. Brainwave and the Utopian son essentially kind of have like a mutiny, and they kill off the Utopian, and they kill off his mom, and they basically take over like the world as superheroes. And
they take over the world in the sense that they think they can do a better job of running it than the corrupt politicians and governments around the world. So there is kind of a positive note to it. They just believe that they think they can help in a different way that The times have changed for basically, stopping criminals and bank robberies and crimes isn't as effective today as it used to be back in the past.
Yeah. And that brings up my favorite scene in the first 2 episodes. It's the scene where the two brothers are talking, Walt and Sheldon, and they're talking in their sort of like their Justice League table area, right? And basically Brainwave is saying how things are different. He's essentially saying what you just said. And, Sheldon is just really holding on to his principles. He's always principles on his sleeves, right? And it's just the two ideologies button heads with each other. I just feel like in the comics, the Brainwave character is less sympathetic and he seems more sinister. And here it's you can kind of relate with him more.
Yeah, I mean, I still get a slightly sinister vibe, a little bit, but yeah, in the comic, it's much more apparent.
They take over, and it's really brutal. He does this trick. Brainwave does this trick to Lady Liberty, his sister-in-law, Sheldon's wife. He does this thing where he puts her into this little a mental painting, like he does to Black Star in this first episode. Yeah, and he's basically, we're just killing you right now. He tells her, and that always stood out to me because they show her in this kind of utopian scene, and then they show the reality, and she's just got stabbed, and she's got all these blades in her, and it's really fucked up.
Yeah, the line that he says in the comic about how that's so you that you would think that 30 heroes attack you and that you'd be able to hold your own, but in reality, this is actually what's happening, and it was very brutal.
Yeah, because it's happening to this guy's mother, and it's the sort of matronly character, just to see her the way they just brutally took her out. It's messed up. And so
that's the comic. Now, do you feel that is going to happen in the show? Or, I mean, I that was actually, that happens in the 3rd issue of the comic book.
Okay, so, 3rd issue, okay.
Yeah, so the way it's going right now, I don't feel like that's going to happen the next episode or even the one after that. I mean, maybe by the end, I don't know. But I feel like they're not going to do that right away here, which is weird. It seems like, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, it could all be a prequel leading up to the big moment, when they take over. And maybe that'll happen kind of towards the season finale. I don't know, man. The problem with Netflix shows, right, is that so many of them don't get finished, right? They only have a season or two, and then they don't make any more.
Maybe Netflix model is very odd. They base it on how appealing it is for new subscribers. They want to make a big buzzworthy thing, and they care more about getting that new subscriber than keeping long-term subscribers. They figured that they're already going to be there anyway from something else. But I've been burned by Netflix so many times.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan of the show The OA, and they ended that 2nd season on such a crazy cliffhanger, and it will never get answered. What else? What was the show with Santa Clarita Diet?
Yeah.
Great show. Really funny show. Ends on a crazy cliffhanger, and we'll never know. It got canceled. And then there's other shows too that just seem to go on for forever, and they're terrible.
Maybe they're just trying to make this kind of almost a prequel season to the way the comic actually really is.
Well, but then again, they have the fight with Black Star. I mean, that's in the 1st and 2nd issues.
Okay.
And then actually too, I mean, the show throws a big twist into that where it's not actually Black Star or clone or something. So I mean, I guess that's going to be some subplot that they follow on that I do not recall from the comics.
Yeah. What do you think that's about?
I don't. Maybe they have some bigger plans for that character. I don't remember him really doing anything other than getting beat up there and getting locked. I don't think they even killed him. I think they actually lock him up.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't even remember that scene. Honestly, I don't remember that scene from the comic at all. And I thought that it was kind of funny because he really looks like Darkseid and Mongol put together, right?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, that scene was panel for panel the comic.
Yeah.
Other than how the fight ended.
Yeah.
Which is with Brandon punching, breaking his face essentially. That did not happen. They they were able to shut him down without that happening. Brandon wasn't even there actually, because in the comics, both Brandon and Chloe are both kind of screw ups, and like I mentioned earlier, Brandon is a very different character, who seems to be in the show seems to be trying to live up to his dad's ideal and is falling short and is getting frustrated. Where, essentially Chloe and Brandon are fairly similar in the comic. They're just in there for the celebrity, and they don't show up to the fights or anything like that. When people need help, they just want to make money.
So in the comic, then, am I misremembering this? Like, doesn't he kind of join his uncle though and join the bad guy side?
Yeah. That's the end of the third issue. Is Walter convincing him that they need a new leader and they need to take. I'm sorry, that's the end of the second issue. They need to take out the Utopian, and then that's when that plan goes into effect.
Okay, so like Chloe though is kind of similar to the way that she is in the comics, at least, even though we don't necessarily like her acting as much. But like,
it's exactly like the character. I mean, the haircut is spot on.
yeah. But I did like the scene where he went to go kind of patch things up with her, and he brought her bagels. I really didn't like the scene where they were sitting down and having dinner, and they got into an argument. I thought that was really cheesy.
Yeah, it was super cheesy. Yeah.
So for Mark Millar, you and I are both pretty big fans of him, and so one thing I think people might know, but let's just tell them that like both Brian and I kind of really loved comics as a kid. Then we kind of fell off, and then when we became friends, our friendship kind of made us both get back into comics at the same time. And when we got back into comics, we were really into New X-Men, which was drawn by Frank Quitely and was written by Grant Morrison, and then Ultimate X-Men, which was written by Mark Millar. And besides that, Mark Millar also wrote The Authority, which was like a game changer for us too. It was like, whoa, I can't believe superhero comics can be this awesome. And so he can turn people off. His style is like definitely like deconstructing the superheroes that we grew up loving. And he can get pretty offensive with some of his material. Not everything of his is great, but he knows how to get you excited about one of his books. What do you think, man?
Yeah, he's the ultimate hype man for his own work, absolutely. And really, if this is, I believe, the fourth adaptation of his that's been turned into as like a TV or movie. There was first it was Wanted, then Kick-Ass, and Kingsman, and then this. So three of those are superhero deconstructions. I mean, absolutely. And Kingsman being the odd man out, and that's more of a kind of James Bond deconstruction, spies and stuff. So, and I've had mixed views on the source material versus the adapted material on all of these. I'm really curious as to how you felt about his previous works, and then compared to this as well.
Okay, thank you for asking me that. That's a great thing to answer. Okay, so first off, Kingsman, the first movie. Probably a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I actually love Kingsman. Kingsman, the movie. Yeah, hive mind, man. But Kingsman, the first movie, is in my top 10. That's how much I love Kingsman. And I've never read the comic. I've like sort of thumbed through it, and I was like, "What the fuck? This is nothing like the movie."
And I'm gonna say, I bought it, and I read after I watched the movie. I think this is the only time I've watched the movie then read the book in terms of his work. Okay. And I just didn't like it. It's much more grounded, I guess.
Yeah.
The movie is much more colorful, and it's just brighter, I suppose. I mean, there's a lot that they took from it, but ultimately, like, the movie is infinitely better than the book in this regard, and that's a very rare case for me.
I don't like Kick-Ass as much as I like Kingsman, but I still thought Kick-Ass was a lot of fun.
Kick-Ass was a lot of fun, and again, I've only read and watched the first volume. I've never seen the second movie or read the second volume of the book. But I mean, it's fairly faithful. There are some big differences that I thought there were pluses and minuses on both sides there. So it's like pretty even for me with Kick-Ass, and like I said, Kingsman is just far and away the movie so much better.
Yes. I've read the first 2 volumes of Kick-Ass. And there's some like real disturbing stuff in the second volume that kind of caused a controversy when it came out. But I did like the first movie. But that's another thing where it's like they have a good director. They have really good actors too in that movie. With the other adaptation, Wanted, that one I feel is like the most dramatically different from the source material.
Yeah, with Wanted, which the comic is great.
Yes,
and it's basically a world where the supervillains eliminate all the heroes and they run the world. And it's kind of like they don't do it like it's still very behind the scenes running the world, but they do. And instead, the movie decided to take sort of the ability of the main character and then make it that everyone can do that and make it all about that. And it was weird.
yeah.
I mean, if you would just watch that movie and not know about the comic, I can see how you could think it's okay. But like to me, that book was just way better too.
You know, if you guys like the show Jupiter's Legacy, if you like any of these adaptations that we're talking about, I actually really do recommend that you guys go check out the comics, because pretty much in every case, with maybe the exception of Kingsman, the comic is like way better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of this show, I feel like this show is ultimately going to deviate more in the style of Wanted than the slighter deviation than with Kingsman or I can't remember the Kick-Ass.
Okay, so you think that Jupiter's Legacy is going to like deviate a lot from the source material?
I think it is. I mean, because they got to the point real quick in the comic, and I feel like they're dragging this out because they're at one hand they're showing you the things that happened in the first issue, but on the other hand they're just completely they're extending what is going on there. So like I said, they're not going to have this coup on the Utopian and Lady Liberty in the next episode. Like maybe by the end of the series,
right?
But and they're going to stretch it out in some way, and I'm a little concerned about it.
Yeah, I think that probably the way that they're going to do it is they're thinking it's like Game of Thrones, right? Where you have Josh Duhamel, who's like Ned Stark, essentially. Everyone thinks he's the lead. Everyone thinks he's the most important character. And then you're going to kill him off, like maybe in the second to last episode. And it's going to be this big shocker, or it's supposed to be a big shocker. But at that point, maybe people won't be as interested by the time you get to that.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, because it's not a great look so far.
But the one thing that I really liked was that battle with Black Star, because I felt like that was kind of like comic accurate.
Yeah, like I said, that was almost panel for panel from the comic, and that was really interesting. I mean, it's hard to make a character that's that large, like Black Star, look real. So I mean, it looks a little CW-esque, I guess.
Yes, it does.
But that's when that happened. I started to turn a little bit with the show, I guess. And I started to enjoy it a little more post that. Like I enjoyed the second episode more than the first.
Yes.
First half an hour of the first episode, I'm like, what is this? I'm like, do we really have to review the show?
Yeah.
But I warmed to it a little bit more as it went on. But I still think it's I don't have, my expectations are a lot lower now, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, dude, I had the exact same thought. I was like, oh shit, we got to review this. Like maybe we'll just kind of bow out of this one, you know? Yeah. But then I saw that battle, and it's just like, it was really like a superhero battle where they're kind of like using each other's powers, or like there's a big guy and he's like throwing him off, but then another person's charging in at the same time. You haven't seen really that kind of fighting in a superhero movie, except for maybe like Endgame or Infinity War.
Yeah.
You know? Because even in all the X-Men movies, there really isn't a scene where it's like everybody's taking on this one guy, except for maybe like Apocalypse in X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah, there's generally not as much fighting as you'd expect in the X-Men movies, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always kind of like one-on-one, or it's like just a person's using their power in a specific way. But in this, it was like everybody's piling on one guy, and it's like nonstop. It's not like, they fight the guy, and then he walks and fights another person. Like kind of like the way that Thanos would in Infinity War or Endgame. This was like they're all piling on at once.
Yeah.
I was digging that. So we'll see how the show goes. Me and Brian are going to kind of test it out, see if we like it. Next time around, we're probably going to review 3 episodes, and that'll be like within a week or two. We'll post it up on here. So until then, you guys can tell us in the comments what you thought of the show, and if you're going to be sticking around for the whole thing. All right, so me and Brian will see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.